Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Mazza, drummer, percussionist, inviting you to join me with friends, great artists on the planet, and music specialists of all kinds in our world, talking about shaping your journey. My special guest today is Mr. Kenny Aronoff. Please help me, Kenny, with doing a small introduction about before we go on to shaping your journey, a little bit of background. I know you have a tremendous background, but just for those people or those few people who may not know your work in general, from the beginning.
Okay, so thanks for having me, Aldo. This is awesome. We've known each other for, I don't want to say how many years because I like to tell everybody I'm 21 years old. But anyway, we've known each other a long time. Anyway, so I was a little kid, grew up in Western Massachusetts in a small country farmhouse in a little town of 3,000 people in the hills of Western Mass. And, there was nothing to watch on TV. So me and my twin brother were always outside playing, inventing things to do. One day my mom screamed at us to come into the house, and we thought we were in trouble. Did something wrong, which was usually the case for me. Anyway, I come in and basically the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show on the TV. And I was just blown away. I was like bouncing off the walls. I'd heard rock and roll on the radio, but I'd never seen it. And I didn't know who they were. All I know is I want to do that. And basically that was when I realized what my purpose in life was before I even knew what those words meant. And it's not coming from up here. It's a passion thing. It was something I was feeling. I just want to do that. I got to do that. So I go, Mom, who are these guys? She said, they're the Beatles. I went, well, I want to play in the Beatles. Call them up. And I want to play drums. No more piano. No more piano. It's drums. And I want to be in the Beatles. And she didn't call the Beatles up, obviously. And she didn't get me a drum set either. So, but they saw that I was so crazy about music and playing, beating things. They finally got me a cymbal and a snare drum because we didn't have money. And I started playing along on 45s, music. And I started my first band called the Alley Cats, like the Alley Cats. And there was a song called the Alley Cat. And we played Beatles music. And man, I just would dream that I was in the Beatles. But here's the point of the story. 50 years later, I get called to do a CBS special called The Night That Changed America, which is honoring the Beatles for that Ed Sullivan Show that 73 million people saw in North America. And I get to play drums with the two remaining Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. I mean, come on. But I also got to play with some of my other heroes, like a Stevie Wonder, Joe Walsh from the Eagles and James Gang, Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters, Jeff Lynne from ELO, Alicia Keys, John Legend, John Mayer, Keith Urban, Brad Paisley, and on and on. And so, afterwards when I was done, I got to hang with Ringo. We became really good friends. But my point is, I went from 10 years old seeing the Beatles on TV to 50 years later playing with them. And basically what happened in between was this little kid working his butt off. And I became successful and have stayed successful in this business for over 40 years because I did follow my heart. I did follow my passion. I did realize my purpose. And since then, I've been on over 300 million records sold, 61 or nominated Grammy songs I've played on. I've toured with everybody from my first 17 years of my career that were big was with John Mellencamp, all his hits and tours. But I've worked with people like Sting, Bruce Springsteen, Elton John, Chris Cornell from Audioslave, Tony Iommi, me and Glenn Hughes from Deep Purple, Tony Iommi from Sabbath. We started a band. I toured with the Pumpkins. I played with in the blues sector, B.B. King, Ray Charles, Buddy Guy, the girls, a lot from Canada, Alanis Morissette, Avril Lavigne, Celine Dion. And then Chickenfoot, which was a super group, two guys from Van Halen, Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, me and Joe Satriani. Just did 2 Joe Satriani records. it's so diverse. The country people, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings. I mean, you don't get more country than that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that because I'm so I'm not young. I when I was young, there was no school of rock, so I committed to 5 years of heavy duty orchestral training, and I eventually got into. I studied at Indiana University, #1 school of music, in orchestral training, and I got into the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra, and I turned it down because I was following my heart. I wanted to play rock and roll, and that's pretty much my story.
That's interesting. I mean, you and I played on one record together with Aldo Nova. Remember?
Aldo Nova, another
Yes,
Canadian artist.
and he's still around. He's actually I spoke to him not too long ago.
Awesome.
He got married and he's doing well. He's with his new record, new record or new band, and
Yeah.
new projects. He's looking like 25.
Good. That's
Yeah,
always
no,
good.
Yeah, that's great. But the one thing that you mentioned that you studied classical percussion, and some people know that, but the reading, the musicality. I mean, I was a rock drummer, and then I did the same thing. I went to study classical percussion, and I maintained that. And it does so much more for your playing, right? You were studying with George Gaber at the time, who we also had at COSA.
And Vic Firth.
And Vic Firth.
Firth.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice. Yes. I mean, in the day you said, I mean, we didn't have people to study with. We didn't have these schools. We didn't have like the COSAs that I mean,
No.
you've been to COSA and that kind of formation. So we had to find our way around, right? And when you came out of that, I believe you were a mallet player.
Yeah, I actually won a yes, I was a timpanist and a mallet player. I mean, Indiana University, you had to be great at everything. And George Gaber was, for all you listening, George Gaber was the guy that, when I took my first lesson, I didn't have a pencil and eraser, and he threw me out of his office and gave me F and basically told me to F off, too. And he said, don't you ever show up to any rehearsal, anything without a pencil and eraser. I mean, there was no hand holding. There was no showing up unprepared. We were unprepared, your lesson would last for 10 minutes. And if you kept being underprepared, you were thrown out of the school. That's why that school's #1. They were not hand holding. There was no entitlement. You couldn't have your mommy call you up. You were there because it was the best school and you had to prove yourself every semester. And I saw people get washed out. That type of discipline is incredible. Vic Firth was the same way. Vic was like, if you're not prepared, give me your money, see you later. He wouldn't throw you out, but he didn't want to waste his time with your not being prepared for a lesson.
Sure.
And those are great fundamentals. I mean, and the reading aspect. Oh, and to answer your question, yes, I became really good at mallets, and I won a concerto competition at Indiana University where I was the soloist on marimba with a 60-piece orchestra and a conductor in an opera hall bigger than the New York Met. And this was one of the 4 pieces on my senior recital. I practiced this violin concerto that I saw Itzhak Perlman perform. It was beautiful. It's called The Introduction to Rondo Capriccioso by Camille Saint-Saëns. And there's a book that a modern drummer put out, a Legend series, and I'm in that book. And there's a little a site you can go to, and you can hear me perform this virtuoso violin concerto that I played on marimba. But I had to practice that 2 or 3 hours a day for 1 year. 1 year, every single day, because it's so fast and so technical. It's like anything else. If you stop practicing your single stroke roll, you're going to lose your ability to do a single stroke roll.
Yeah. And the nice thing about that is that it really develops your musicality. I mean, I certainly learned that. I had kind of the same deal with a guy called Pierre Beluse in Montreal at McGill University. He was like that. And I was kind of thrown in. And when I was accepted, I couldn't go back. I said, well, this is my chance. And he was the same. There was no, it was called like burning the boats. Yeah, same thing.
You know what? See, these people, Arthur Press, who I studied with from the Boston Symphony Orchestra, see, back then, this is like just after World War II. And if you told your parents you wanted to be a music major, they go, "What? You need to get a job where you can make money to support the family." It was a different time. We were not an affluent society back then. We were building to become affluent. So it was all about hard work, self discipline, perseverance. There was no entitlement. If you got a D on a paper, it's because you deserved it. If you did a if you got yelled at by your teacher, most likely you deserved it. And there was no recourse. There was nobody like your mommy coming in saying, "You can't yell at because my mom would yell at me. If I got a C or D on a paper, the teacher didn't have to yell at me. My parents yelled at me. But that built a sense of self-worth and responsibility and accountability that it's only you can stand up for you. And if you want to be the best, you can't. They don't hand it to you. Nobody's born successful. Nobody's born successful, and success does not land in your lap. So these instructions that we got from our teachers were so valuable to teach you to be the teacher and the student, all within you. Nobody had to tell you to practice, Aldo, right? You
Right.
practiced because that's what you needed to do.
And you realized that and you saw the people around you. You knew what had to be done, that you knew that, right? And you had to be captain of your ship, right?
Exactly.
And
great.
speaking of, I mean, you brought a thought to my mind when you spoke of your mother. I remember, I mean, you're a sensitive player, playing timpani and mallets
Yeah.
and all of that. And just an interjection here that I have to throw in. I remember this clearly as you mentioned your mother. When you were at COSA, your mother came out. And,
Yeah.
remember that? And it was
Yeah.
funny because during the day we would have all the classes, and then at night we would feature some of the artists in a festival concerts. So I walked in the afternoon during your sound check, and I'm looking over at the sound guy. Ezra was his name. And he was there with his, typical like this. And I said, "How's it going, Ezra?" He says, "Perfect, that's fine." And then I looked at the board and I said, "Did you start your sound check?" He says, "Yeah, all done." But I said, "All your pots are like at 0." He says, "Kenny is so loud. I don't need to do anything." It's funny because then I walked out and your mother looks at me and says, "Kenny's wonderful, but I wish he wouldn't play so loud." I thought that was funny. But I mean, going from that sensitivity of a player, and it's all context, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To be able to do what you do in the context that you need to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I didn't have to play it loud, but there's an energy that was inside me. I felt like I had to reach the last guy in those like hockey stadiums that you have up there, the arenas. I mean, I just felt like I needed to project. Technically, I didn't because I have mics on the drums, but there's an energy. The bottom line is I also could push the band.
Right.
When I was with Mellencamp or any of these bands, you want to rock, man. And, I could push the band to push harder. And it created an energy and excitement. You can see it from the audience too. So it was just, the bottom line is this is natural for me to play that way like you said, in a certain, you adapt to the stuff, the music and the arena or whatever you're playing in. That felt right to me. Not everybody has to hit hard, but that's what I did.
Right. But also
do. I still do.
The other interesting thing that I remember, speaking of also stylistically, there was a project that you played on. It was a swing project. Was it the Buddy Rich one?
The Buddy Rich. Yeah,
Yes.
Burning for Buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, people listening who only know you as perhaps a rock player in that style,
Yeah.
besides the classical, the training and the rock drumming that you were into also yourself, you were also playing jazz, and that was one of the nicer tracks actually in that whole project when you played, which surprised some people
thank you.
because you're a rock guy, but
Yeah.
You're more wide than
Well, when I thank you. When I grew up, the music that was on my parents' turntables was jazz and classical because they were New Yorkers, so their music was one of their big things was jazz. So I learned to hear jazz my whole life. But I mean, we're talking John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, and the big bands like Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich Big Band. And my parents took me to concerts, and I actually started playing in jazz trios and quartets. And in college, even though I was a percussionist, classical major, I was always in one of the big bands playing big band music. So funny enough, when Kathy Rich and Neil Peart, who were producing that double CD "Burning for Buddy" on Atlantic Records, they sent me music for me to play that was not jazz. It was more kind of like rock and roll, but Buddy's rock and roll music wasn't that great. So I said, no way. So I picked Big Swing Face because it was a medium tempo song, which actually was really difficult. Like anything done right is very difficult. And it was more like, zat do da ba da ba 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 boo ba da ba ba. That's it, ba do da ba do. But then I went, okay, I can manage that. Meanwhile, I'm spending a week before this recording with the Buddy Rich Band. I'm a week recording with Cinderella, the rock band in Philly, then a week with Hank Jr. in Nashville playing country, then a week in New Orleans playing New Orleans stuff. I don't even know the artist. Then a week in Canada recording with Patricia Conroy, a country record. Then I go and record with the Buddy Rich Big Band. So I'm like practicing Big Swing Face at 1 a.m. after the session. Then they call me up and go, like with 3 weeks left, like, Kenny, everybody's doing 2 songs. We thought maybe you should do Straight No Chaser. I'm like, I love that song, but it's so friggin' fast. It's like ding 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 da da ba da ba da ba da ba ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da da ba da da ba da da good. I mean, it's blazing, and I'm like, I said, Kathy, listen, I love that song, but I don't know if I'm going to get it together in time for the recording. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll try it. But I have first right of refusal. If it sucks, don't put it on, don't put it on the record. Anyway, I'm practicing it, and we go to record at the power station, and I'd never met Neil Peart. I remember walking. I'm so tired, so I haven't slept that much, and I'm like, why did you do this, Kenny? You shouldn't be doing this. And as soon as I get off the elevator, there's cameras, and everybody's there, and it's like, I'm the last guy to record, and Neil Peart, I'd never met Neil Peart, and that was so cool. And anyway, I get the drums are all set up, and I meet the band. The band's looking at me like I'm a janitor. Like, who's this guy? I'm like, but this is my vision. I'm so intimidated. So finally, we're going to record. You guys listening? I mean, I just told you, I played with Cinderella and all. This band was so loud. I was facing them. It was the loudest thing. And impeccable time. If you drag or speed up, they don't even listen. They just do. They are perfect time. So we do 4 takes of Big Swing Face, and Neil Peart says, "Come on in," and I listen to it. I go, "Nah, I gotta do it again." And he says, "Oh, you only get 4 takes." I went, "What? Since when do you only get 4 takes?" He says, "Yeah, but they never told me." So they get you. You remember Freddie Gruber?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Freddie, for those people who don't know, he was one of Buddy Rich's dearest friends, and he was a jazz drummer too. And I used to take a couple lessons with him. Anyway, they bring Freddie in, who's there, and then Neil says, "What do you think?" He's smoking cigarette. Goes, the kid did good. The kid's good. It's all right. No. I didn't. I swear, I wish I could have done it again. I wanted to relax a little bit more, and anyway. So now we're going to do Straight No Chaser. I'm crapping in my pants. I am so nervous. And I'm like, okay, you only got 4 takes. You only got 4 takes. And so I come out of the gate hard. And I'm telling you, I swear to God, I'm reading, by the way. I'm reading the music because I don't have time to memorize all this stuff. That's the advantage of reading. So I've written everything out. I'm reading, trying to catch all the hits. And I look at my hands at one point and go like, who the heck's playing? It's like, it was like an hour by. I said, well, hey, hey, Kenny, who's ever playing, they're doing a great job. Don't get in their way. And so I just played. And you know how it is. You get a solo. I had a solo at the end. The chances of not messing up one thing somewhere is almost like impossible. Somehow, I got lucky. I didn't know what the solo was going to be. I created it on the spot. I didn't click my sticks or drop a stick or drop a beat or rush here or slow down there. That never happens. It's always like, we better try it again. I swear to God, that whole thing was one take, no edits, done. It was the scariest session I've ever done in my life, and the most grateful I've ever been that I could pull it off. Oh my God. And if you want to make $1 million, just go bet anybody to guess who played on that track. Nobody will ever guess it's me. No way.
Right. Well, actually, you did the same thing. Wasn't it when Emil Richards with a Cosa, you played the Flintstones theme?
We did? I forgot.
Think
I
so.
remember he was there. I remember he was there.
Because we used to record CDs that we used to release, and I remember he wanted to do. He says, "Oh yeah, for my set, I'm going to play some of the songs I did from I Love Lucy and the Flintstones." And so he asked me. I said, "Who should I get to play drums?" And I said, "Let's do the unobvious." And I think I said, "Why don't you get Kenny to do it?" And I think you played on that one.
I think so. I vaguely remember.
Yes. Because we always had a rrhythm section labs and everything. Right?
Yeah.
And then
I remember that now.
It was
I hadn't thought about that.
No, it's and sometimes I say, you have to. This is not a show to show off anybody. This is a place of learning. So let's.
Yeah.
What would somebody sitting there, looking at Emil Richards playing the Flintstones theme and Kenny's playing drums? Like that's not obvious, but
no.
But why not?
That was so cool.
Yeah.
I remember being up there. It was beautiful. It was in Vermont, and it was at a college, and it was hot and humid, but it was so cool.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, not cool as in temperature, but a cool environment.
Oh yeah, and everybody. I mean, we had 25 artists, and I mean, of all the styles and everything. I mean. I had a great conversation with Mark Julian about that because he was a student there.
What?
He was a student for 2 years at COSA, and so he's been on one of these podcasts, and it's like it's you're trailblazing for yourself, right? I mean, that's why the theme of shaping your journey from when we're young. I mean, you're the same person, but you just grow up in that whole thing, like Neil Peart and all of those guys. I mean, they were once young, they were once started, and I knew Neil very well. He actually came to Costa, and we all played together. Actually,
Wow.
Yeah, and I have and I do have an interview with him that we're going to eventually put on. But it's the same thing when you think about it. Once you set your track on, like you did, like we all did. At our levels, then you stay on it. You could stop, right? But why would you? I mean, look at you. You're in LA. You used to live in
Indiana.
Indiana, right? In a small place, and then at some point you moved to LA, and you just continued, and you're still doing it. You're still playing, and you're still exploring, and you're still growing. Age.
Absolutely, and I'm just wired that way. And it's not just in music. I mean, I just did a 4-day immersion, 12 hours a day of learning concepts on how to be a better person and get the most value out of life as a businessman too. It's incredible. I mean, I'm just wired that way. I like to keep learning and keep exploring. I have an autobiography. I have the Legends book. There's a drum book coming out. I got a wine coming out. I wrote another book about 5 years ago, and I'm going to revisit it and probably eventually put that out. and I have my own studio. I record tracks. Like I said, I did Joe Satriani's new record, The Elephants of Mars. I think we're going to tour all through Canada. So later this year. So, so I'll probably see you. Yeah, I mean, I'm constant. It's like, heck, you know what? Oh, this is funny. On a side note, so I told the producer, I've never played marimba on a rock record or I played vibes on Mellencamp record, and so he wrote this part, and there's some pretty heavy parts on Joe's record, but he wrote double stops and format, so it was like ga 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 ga, and it's not like just seconds, it's like thirds, fourths, fifths, in and out. Oh my God, I had to, I had
Nice.
to practice my butt off, but I'm on a record with marimba
Nice, nice.
because
Well,
I still have a marimba. I own one.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it's really nice. I mean, when you think back in all those records from the Beatles to the Stones, I mean, what was that song? Wasn't it Under My Thumb? That's
Boom, bum,
right.
boom, bum, boom, boom, boom,
That's a
bum, boom, bum,
marimba.
boom, boom, boom. It's a marimba. How cool is that?
And all the stuff that they used to do on the Beatles that were like all these other instruments.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge room. There's huge room for a lot of this percussion on rock, and it's how you shape it, how you
Absolutely.
orchestrate it, right?
Well, with Mellencamp, I mean, so obviously John's biggest number one hit single ever was Jack and Diane, and it featured me, gave me that big drum solo, and it wasn't that easy. That song wasn't even going to be on the record. And one day I walk in and somebody's got this metal box, and the producer, and I went, "What's that?" He says, "Oh, this is a Lin One drum machine the Bee Gees are using." And I'm like, "Drum machine? They replace drummers." So I grabbed it. Anyway, I programmed the whole intro. The whole idea was John and the producer, Don, were trying to come up with a creative way to make Jack and Diane get on the record. Forget about the radio. Just get it on the record because it was just a folk song. It was like nothing. And so I programmed when I was playing on drums, so it just had the new sound, drum machine. And then eventually that got boring, so they said, we need a drum thing, a drum solo. I created that Jack and Diane drum thing on the spot, terrified I was going to get fired again. And so the song so I guess the point is that after that song became big and huge, John, every time he'd write a song on acoustic guitar, he'd look at me and go, "What do you got, Aronoff?" In other words, he wanted me to come up with another great drum beat that would make his song be a number one hit single, because ultimately that made him millions and millions and millions of dollars. Not me, him. So why not? But here's my point. So after a while, you're starting to run out of ideas, because he even said it. I write the same song all the time. And I was going, no shit. Oops, sorry, I swore. No kidding. So anyway, the point of the story is that suddenly I started going, well, maybe I'll start by playing percussion first. Like, do the overdubs first. Then that'll affect what everybody else does. Then I'll come back and put the drums on. I mean, I was just looking. Hell, Pink Houses. I thought, all right, I'm just not going to play at the beginning. That's something creative. Don't play the drums. I played a headed tambourine. Boo-da-dee-bow. Ba-ba. Not a regular tambourine, a headed. Because John had never had a headed tambourine on his record. And there's a black man, in a black hat, living in a black neighborhood. So I was looking for percussion to inspire me to come up with ideas. It's interesting.
That's a really interesting approach. I'd never thought of it that way. But I mean, I've always been fascinated by different sounds. I mean, I have everything, as
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, and I'm into sounds, and I create. I still have my Lin drum, actually. Now that you mention it,
Is it the
It's
Lin
a-
1 or 2?
the one.
Wow, that was like, dude, you guys, anyone listening, I mean, that thing came out around 1980. Even Jeff
Yes.
Porcaro used it or was messing with it. He was friends with Roger Lynn. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, in those days, as you remember, you had to have the latest. They would call you, right? And when you showed up, they said, "Do you have what's the latest?" Oh, it's the DMX-5 or
Yeah.
whatever that was,
Yeah.
or the Roland. So you had to come up, and you had to have your stuff delivered.
Yeah.
And said, "Do you have the which version of the what was that English electronic drums?"
I almost real.
The
Well, there was Roland. There was
Simmons,
I had
the
Simmons, but
Simmons
I
drums.
had the D drum.
Okay, but the
I
Simmons drums before that, remember?
Yeah.
You had
Oh
the three,
yeah.
the five, and then the sevens, and then so you had to have,
Yeah.
you had to have all of these. So I said at one point, I mean, how it was expensive, but you had to have it to enhance, and they wanted to hear, oh, so and so had it on his record. Let's see what you can do besides playing the parts. So I played some of the percussion parts with the machines, then replaced some of the machine parts, and then you got rid of sold off the the
Yeah.
machines. But I
Yeah.
happened to just that one slipped by, and I never got rid of it.
Yeah.
Sentimental, I guess. But it's interesting that those of us who had experience with percussion that are able to bring this in. So I'm glad you brought that up, that you did the marimba in a rock thing. Beautiful, beautiful. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's on the new record. I mean,
Or any of these, frame drum things, or I mean, I do that all the time. But
yeah.
producers, I guess, they don't hear it; they're not exposed to it. So it's up to us who
Yeah.
are experimenting to suggest, like you did. That was
Yeah.
that was
The
brilliant.
the thing is that um, styles and things change fast. Like it used to be that I had drums in New York, Nashville, LA, Indiana, of course, Japan, and Germany. And when people were selling records, I'm on three albums that sold 40 million each. Two Celine Dion records and Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell 2, without doing anything for love, but I won't do that. They sold 40 million, and my point is the record labels made 82 cents on the dollar. 82 cents times 120 million is a lot of records. So a lot of money. So with that money, they could afford to put us every session I did. They'd fly me first class. I'd have my cartage company set my drums up. I'd get a rental car, stay at the fanciest hotels. They give me a per diem. I'd just show up to the studio, everything set up. I'd have like 5 bass drums, 100 snares, 200 cymbals, and a lot of percussion. And because money wasn't an issue, I could experiment, like you said, all kinds of weird stuff. Put cymbals on my drums and maybe, all kinds of weird stuff. And they would take the time. I'd create loops with Melissa Etheridge. I remember creating all these cool loops where I'd take a small little piccolo snare, put a little splash cymbal on it, play with a blast stick and a brush, and then I'd overdub the little minor mini bongos, then maybe a crasher with a tambourine, then a shaker, and then they'd mix it and they'd compress it through a Sans amp, and you get this cool industrial thing, and we'd use that as a loop to record to. And then I'd take that and use it live. I'd put it into a D drum machine that had a short sample, length, and I could hit a pad and play the loop that I created. I mean, because there was money, we could take the time to do those things. Now, and then a producer from another session would walk in and go, "Wow, do that on my record, do that on my record." But now that the budgets are gone and I have my own studio, it's like most of the time I'm recording by myself. So it didn't. It's not. So these ideas come and go a lot quicker now, and they don't get rejuvenated. People don't see. Oh wow, I never thought of that, because they're spending their time by themselves, and
Yeah.
so they don't see this stuff.
Unless they hear it on another record or somebody hips them to
Yeah.
it or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the one thing that aside from staying in your studio, we spend more time alone than probably in any other time in history, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Thank God for technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in LA, I'm in Montreal, and here we are.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we could be even playing live now. And
Yeah.
there are new technologies there. There's this
Yeah.
thing called the Elk that's out has no delay whatsoever when you're
Oh
playing
wow.
live. This is brand
Oh,
new.
I haven't even
So,
heard of that. I'm gonna have to write that down.
ELK.
Elk. The elk.
Yeah, they're amazing from Sweden, I believe. Yeah.
Is it expensive, or is it affordable?
No, it's affordable, and I was just speaking to the people. I heard some of the demos that they did.
Yeah.
I was really impressed. So this
So
is live.
this would be So live, that's where the latency problem comes.
You're,
So my studio, during the pandemic, I already had my recording studio, but what I did to be proactive, and I call it adapt or die, is I lost all my speaking engagements. So I got lights and a lot of technology and created an environment, cameras and lights and then, 4 TV monitors and all kinds of stuff. I got 3 computers going at once. But my point is, there is definitely a latency when you're playing the drums to tracks. You hear the music in time, but it's like bam, bam. It's like it's late. I mean, because there's a lot of audio that has to. I got 6 channels, stereo drums, stereo music, my vocal mic, and then a playback for the opening video that plays, and that all goes mixed and goes into Zoom. And then you got 2 cameras, all goes into Zoom. That's a lot of information into Zoom. So there's all kinds of obstacles, and then you're at the mercy of the internet, the power of your particular internet. So
right.
I'll have to check this elk out
Yeah. No, no.
because
Check it out. This is brand new, and it's just out now, and I'm in conversation with them because I want to try some things myself. So this is exciting.
that's so cool, man.
Yeah.
See, I just learned something. I'm
Yeah.
gonna write it down. Elk.
Elk. Yes. But moving forward, what would you? I mean, we can go on for days, Kenny, and we should. Maybe we
Yeah.
should do another one day.
Sure.
Talk about, because there's so much to talk about, and the whole mindset of a musician these days, which has changed drastically. I mean, it's not good or bad. I mean, I had the same experience with the Beatles. I mean, the next day we were all the Beatles. We wanted to be the Beatles.
Yeah.
I didn't end up playing with any of them, but I played with some of them, many of them on record with our brooms.
Yeah.
I was John Lennon first before I became Ringo, right? All of a sudden, the next morning, Kenny, we were all musicians. That was funny? The very next morning in the schoolyard, everybody was singing songs, and in the basements, with brooms. And then I graduated to drums because, I mean, I played in a marching band. They wouldn't let me play drums because they had too many drummers, and so I played bugle.
Are you kidding me?
No.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I played bugle, and then the guys would show me some of the beats. I said, one of these days, one of these guys is not going to be there, and I'm going to sub. So I was learning their parts and everything. But when the instructor came, I would go back to the playing bugle and stuff. And then eventually I graduated.
Story. Tell me, do you have a bugle or a trumpet now? Do you have
I don't.
one?
I don't.
Yeah.
What I did do, though, is... when I started playing in bands, as a teenager, I started mixing percussion in the drum set, and I also played flute because in my high school band, they never paid attention to the percussionists because they would always do the scales and everything with the rest of the band, and I got bored, so I picked up flute, and I would sit in with the band on flute, and then when it came for the whole orchestra to play, then I went back to the percussion.
Good for you, man. That's a great way to learn melody. And theory, and learning is learning. It all adds up. I remember thinking after I graduated from college and I got in the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra, and then I turned it down because I wanted to be in a rock band. I thought, oh my God, what did I do? I spent 5 years, 365 days practicing my butt off on timpani and mallets and theory and conducting and music history, music literature, plus all the other academics. I mean, I always was playing drums, but I wasn't studying drum set. There was no drum set at IU. So I thought, oh my God, what did you do? Why did I do that? Blah, blah, blah. But when the two worlds totally collided and met, that's how I was able to. If I couldn't read, I would never have been able to do 7 years at the Kennedy Center Honors. There's no way. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to read. So I'm playing with Sting, Elton John, Chris Cornell, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, John Mellencamp, everybody. I mean, Steven Tyler, you name Dave Grohl, everybody, all the country artists. It's all about being able to read. And so that's where the worlds came together. Suddenly now, I did Obama's inauguration, 25 artists I played with. Everything
Nice.
from the obvious to Beyonce to Josh Groban to, Bon Jovi, everybody, country, rock, blues, R&B, Stevie Wonder, James Taylor, Sheryl Crow. I mean, it just goes on and on. If I couldn't read music and didn't have an understanding of multiple styles of music, no way I wouldn't have had that job.
Yeah, and many others like that too. I mean, Peter Erskine. You had Harvey Mason. Look at that. I mean, he's a great
Yeah, timpanist
percussionist.
and
Yeah,
percussionist. Yeah,
yeah.
he studied
Anyway,
with Vic Firth.
yeah. And I remember Vic Firth saying to me, he said, Harvey asked me if I really want to do this, and Vic would say to him, this is what Vic told me. He says,
Yeah,
I would say, Harvey, you're playing with Herbie Hancock. You're playing with all of these people.
mm,
What are you doing here?
yeah.
But he wanted to finish that degree, and he wanted
You mean,
to
oh my
learn.
God, he was playing with those people before he got his degree?
I think it was around that time because he was doing tours
Wow,
and playing live with some of
wow,
the guys. But he
wow,
was determined
yeah,
to get that together. Did it pay
wow,
off?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
wow,
Musically, and
yeah, yeah,
it's one of those things you decide. You either do it well or you don't. And if you're going to do
yeah.
it well, you have to put in the time, the work, and you have to have the vision of it, understanding what it represents, right?
I tell people, listen, you got to put in the time. So take one step at, just if you're not motivated, make yourself do 1 hour a day, then 2 hours, then 3 hours. Make yourself and watch the progress you're making. Feels good to get better. I mean, it's nothing. It may not feel fun. I don't believe in mistakes or failures. These are just events that help you get where you want to go. It's not a mistake. It's just learning to be better. Say it like that. It gives you a different feeling.
Sure. I mean, if you did it
Yeah,
one way and it didn't work, well, that shows you. That's a learning process. Then
exactly.
you don't do the
Exactly.
same thing to have different results,
Exactly.
right? You
Exactly.
do it now. You say, "Oh, that doesn't make sense," and that's
Yeah.
forward motion, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, like
Exactly.
Kenny, we could go on forever,
Yeah.
and I think we should another time. But I really want to thank you
Sure.
for joining us today and taking the time. I know you're so
You're welcome.
busy, but
Yeah. Well,
hopefully we'll see
thanks,
you
man.
live.
So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm coming through Canada. I don't know if I'm going to Montreal with John Fogerty this summer, and then later this year with Joe Satriani. Um, yeah.
But our
So
paths will cross for sure, man.
I know you always find me. All right. Well, there's
To
your
be
little head.
continued.
Okay. Thank you so much. And everybody, if you want to see more of what I'm up to, you can just go to my website, www.kennyaronoff.com, or all my social media. Instagram is my name, LinkedIn's my name, Facebook's my name, and Twitter is Aronoff Official. Someone stole my name. Anyway, take care, you guys. We shall see you again.
To be continued. Thank you, Kenny.
All right, bye.